You're recording now, Don.
Okay, let's see, I'll start, I guess, this way. My grandfather worked at the mine. I had two uncles that worked at the mine. My dad worked at the mine. I worked at the mine. My brother worked at the mine. A daughter and a son. All right, my grandfather was on the job. He was a mechanic supervisor, fixing pumps and all on the mining deal when they needed fixing, laying pipe and all to the washer of the float plant, whatever. He worked out there in what they call the field as a supervisor over the crew. And at about 60 years old, he had a heart attack. Well, they let him come back and just hang around and make his retirement where he can retire. All right, my uncle come in out of high school and went to work in the float plant. In 3 years, he was sent to a sanatorium in Tampa, tuberculosis sanatorium. He spent 2 years in the sanatorium. All right, my other uncle, Uncle Elwood, he worked for American Cyanamide, and he worked out there until he was in his 40s, and he had a stroke. And so Uncle Elwood was out of business. My dad worked in the float plant 5 years, and in that 5 years, he was having headaches and bad stomach problems. And the doctor advised him to quit and get out because the reagents and stuff, his system couldn't absorb it and he couldn't work there any longer. All right, I went to work out there as vacation relief, and they move you through all parts of the phosphate field until you get to a position you can get full-time, and that's where you work. And I worked through mining in both mines. I worked in the acid plant, and I wound up in the dry mill department. And I worked through that until I run a railroad locomotive, and we loaded and shipped rock and loaded ships at port to send overseas. And at that time, 99.9% of it was for export. Very little was shipped inward. And the reason that they used Florida for this, they told us that because we had wintertime, we had ports they could ship that stuff out from. That no other place could they mine phosphate and ship it in the winter except Florida. So that's what Swift was doing. Swift, IMC, American Cyanamide, all when they big ship come in, all of us worked together as companies to load that ship and send it out. And they'd bring another. We each had all that we could do to load that ship and send it out. You couldn't load one by yourself. All the companies come in together and load and shipped it out. Now, in the dry mill department, that stuff come out of the float plant, went into tanks. We went in there with a locomotive backed up, loaded on wet rock cars, and carried Agricola, which is on 555, used to be, but it's mined up now. But they had a big A-frame. They dumped in the dumping pit. It went on top, and went down that A-frame in different grades and was poured out. But that stuff was full of reagents because it just come through the float plant. It had all the reagents in the rock. It wasn't washed clean and pretty like they claimed. It was just reagents in the rock. You could smell it as far as you could see the wet rock car. It was in there like that. That's the reason I have no hair. Nobody out there had any because of the reagents in that rock. And when they brought it through the dryers and dried that stuff, there was just dust galore, because had a lot of dust in that rock. And then we loaded in port dumps, cement hoppers, and we loaded, they put it in steel tanks, and they had 18-inch chutes under the bottom of the tanks, and they were numbered, and different grades of rock was in each tank. And they would have a shipment for so much, and then if they had a boat to load, they would use 4 or 5 of them tanks for that grade, loading that boat. And we would just reach under there and load them out. And you could load a car with 4 chutes in about 2 minutes. You could just pull the handles, staggered out, 4 doors. Cars had 8 doors, just stagger 4 doors, load in 2 minutes, shove the handles up, put another one under. And we had 2 dryers drying. The shift behind me, there was a boy working that come out of there from the Appalachians. He was poor, he didn't have nothing. You could tell by his looks he didn't have nothing. His family moved down here for a better life. Well, they put him on the railroad loading that rock, and he was not qualified for that. He was just a poor boy needing a job, and they needed somebody to fill that position. Well, he started loading, and when he loaded, there was so much dust you couldn't see each other or nothing, just covered. Well, when the boy on the front loaded his 2 doors, he looked, and the back 2 doors were running over, so he went and closed his chutes off, but the boy had stepped in the hole, and phosphate had covered him up, that hot phosphate. They carried it to the dumping pit, knocked it down, and he come out the bottom. Now, I wasn't there, but the boys that worked there said that he was dead, and that rock was so hot till his arms had busted open, and, fluids was coming out of it. Now, that was phosphate. All right, I worked out there 9 years and quit. And, let's see, I can give you just about anything you want on that, but I'll give you some of this, I guess.
Don, I don't know if you got it on there, but you had some accounts of the people that you knew that got cancer.
Yeah, okay. Let's see if I can run that. Yeah. After I quit, it was 1966 I quit. And we opened up a business, a paint and body business, and a garage. I went to the Ford place in Fort Meade to pick up some body parts for a job. Was standing at the window waiting to get my turn, to have them bring the parts out. And a friend of mine was coming up through the parking lot. And I hadn't seen him since I had left, and he run a drag line in the mining department. But I knew him well because I'd worked with him. And I said, "Cecil, how you doing?" And when I said that, he started uncontrollably crying, just went all to pieces. And so it was so loud until the whole dealership went quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. I mean, all the mechanics quit, everybody quit. And this went on for about 2 or 3 minutes. And when he finally got his composure, he pulled out his handkerchief, wiped his eyes, and he said, "Don," he says, "I'm dying. I've got cancer. I don't have but 60, 90 days to live." Well, the man wasn't maybe late 30s, early 40s. And what do you say to a man like that? I mean, he was a friend, and he told me this, and it tore him up. And I told him I hated it, and I hoped the very best for him. But he got straightened out then where he could talk and visit. And the dealership went back to work. All right, then the boy I worked with, Willie, me and him started at the same time. Willie ended up working, I believe, in maintenance. Well, anyhow, in his late 30s, early 40s, Willie come with a shop one evening late when I was closing up, and he said he was going around to see his friends that cancer had eaten him up, but he wanted to go around and see his friends before he passed. And he spent about an hour with me, and he left. I had a friend named Floyd that was working on the railroad in the ship. Let's see, he worked on the shift that we relieved. He worked on Jake Hendricks' shift. Floyd Rabble. And Floyd